us out and joining the conversation. So this is, I don't know if you've been to these before, or for some of you, this might be new. We're glad to have you. We developed these community of practice sessions as really to create a space for conversations about PBIS implementation. And we train folks on how to really use some of the measures and data systems like Swiss, the Swiss suite of Swiss, check in, check out Swiss, and iSwiss, as well as some of the measures like the TFI, the School Climate Survey, and that. And we'll look at some opportunities we have for training and those kind of things coming up. So welcome, everyone. We're glad to have you. I try to keep these, unlike some of our webinars where we present a lot, I try to present a little and create more space for conversation. So plan to ask questions and share kind of what's going on where you are. All right, so let's start. We did a quick thing, but I'm curious to hear also about now that we're back from summer break or thinking about when school's starting, depending on what you are. I know we're all 12-month faculty employees at the UO, but I know lots of you probably have summers off or parts of summers off still. So let's just reflect for a minute on what filled your bucket this summer. What was something that really was something that made you feel good and kind of refreshed you over the whatever break you had? Because Megan and I, if you don't know, we co-host a podcast called Expert Instruction together. Maybe some of you have listened to that. Alan, if you Alan's my chat monitor, and he'll be dropping links in the chat for us. But there's a podcast we host, and it's all about PBIS. And we just interviewed our next one. Megan, will it come out next Tuesday? Is that right, when it'll be released? Yeah, so we did an interview.
Next Tuesday.
Next Tuesday, thank you. We do the interviews usually a month before when they get released, but we have a really good guest this month. It's the first time we've ever featured him, and it's Dr. Rob Horner. So if you don't know who Dr. Rob Horner is, I see Mackenzie, looks like a little nod there. Like, he is one of the OGs of PBIS. He really helped create this, and it's gone through many iterations. It did not start out as PBIS. It started out as, I think, EBS, effective behavior supports, then went to positive behavior supports. Then we had to add the I in because the public broadcasting system was like, hey, you're in our lane. So, but it's fascinating. So tune in next week. It was a really cool conversation to hear, like, how he started it, but also answers the question of why data are a key component of this. Like, when he was doing this work, it wasn't just about positive recognition for kids or defining, and teaching those expectations and having consistency among adults on how we respond to any behavior we see, whether it's behaviors we want more of or behaviors we'd like to see less of. Like, all of that was important. But he really talked to us, and you'll hear more in that interview about how he brought data to the teams and said we need to be looking at this regularly if we're going to affect change, we've got to be able to measure that. So really cool. Tune in next week. We're really excited to kick off our year. And Megan and I have a theme every year. And we're getting more, I think we're really honing that in, and we really this year we're so nerdy out on it because we're into data. And so this year's theme is all about data within PBIS. And then we're really starting with tier 1. So today we're kind of setting that foundation about why data is important and what barriers you guys face using data with teams. And then we're going to kind of unpack the different tiers. So we'll start with tier 1 and then move into tiers 2 and 3 as the school year progresses. So stay tuned with both the podcast, this community of practice, as well as the article that Megan puts out, which just came out this week. I'm really excited. We'll have space for that to talk about. So that's kind of our big topic for the year, and today's the kickoff for that. So yay, welcome. So what's new in 25, 26? We were just also down at a conference in California, and just been hearing a lot lately of like people asking like, so what's new with PBIS? What's going on with PBIS? So we want to start with like just talking about what is kind of new in our field for the year. Then we'll move into having a discussion, and I'll quiet my voice and create room for you all to share about how you use data, what obstacles you face in using data for decision making. And then I thought this was a good chance. I looked back at a presentation that Nat and I've done together about the district systems fidelity inventory, where really you can look at a district level and kind of measure implementation. But I thought there were some great examples in there of district data collection plans. So if you're in a district role, if you're in a ESD, or even if you're at the school level, now's a great time to kind of lay out that plan for the year of what data collection will look like. And so I wanted to share those with you as something kind of a takeaway you could kind of use right away. All right, so let's dive in. I'm going to end the show. Who knows Mr. Lindsay, who is Instagram famous? Oh, you guys, this will be fun then. He's hilarious. My kid knows him. So he's a middle school teacher somewhere, I think in the South. I want to say like North Carolina. They're already in school. Let's say stop share. But I'm gonna quickly go over, and he does this thing where he's all about like what words are the kids using. So let's take a look. Let me get this ready. Okay, can you see my screen that I'm on my Instagram page? Okay, so this is Mr. Lindsay. Here's his thing, Mr. Phil Lindsay. He teaches special ed. He's awesome. He's been on the Today Show. He's now like a stand-up in addition to teaching. Like he's got this side hustle that has just taken off. He's probably making more than all of us, right? Good for him. But it's hilarious. So here's let's talk about what's going on this week on the update on the language kiddos are using out there. Come here.
Kids are using most this week. It is August 13th, and I wrote down all the words I heard most in the classroom this week. I didn't know, are you hearing the same ones, different oes? Which one of these do you need me to define for you? So coming in at number 1, it is a trending meme, and the acronym is SDIYBT. But it stands for Start Digging in Your Butt Twin. And they sing it, start digging in your butt twin. And it's just something that they are repeating incessantly. Number 2 is chopped. Everything is chopped right now. This was high number 1 last week. It is still very close at number 2 this week. Number 3, aura is making a comeback. I have heard more references to positive aura and negative aura than I have in the last year. So that one's making a comeback. And then, of course, we have 6, 7. Now it's starting to die down a little bit, but unfortunately there's another number that's replacing it, which is 41. So that is also coming into life. The 41 meme is starting to get in front of more kids. And then we have some honorable mentions. Chat, crash out, and op are still a regular part of their daily vernacular. Let me know what you're hearing in the comments. Here's your weekly update.
Okay, there you go. So that is Mr. Lindsay, and follow him. He's hilarious. I love him. And I don't know, my kid's about to go into 7th grade, so I'm very much in this world. And she just says these funny things, and the language, it's evolving. And I think it's a good, why I want to talk about this and bring this up is that it's applicable to us, right? Like I mentioned with Dr. Rob Horner, when he implemented PBIS back in like the 90s, things have shifted now, right? We're decades later. We expect that the work we do changes. And I know Megan and I, when we ask him, like, or we've heard this, one of his kind of famous quotes is like, what do you think schools will be doing in, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? Do you think they'll still be doing PBIS? And he would say, no, I hope they're doing something better. Like, I don't want it shouldn't look like it looks today. It should grow and evolve and be this iterative process. And so kiddos do that, right? With their language, they're using these kind of weird words. And of course they're saying but, and they're saying these things that sound annoying, but they're kind of taking ownership of their language and embracing that and using it in new ways. And so we're doing the same things in our work. And so let's get back to our slideshow. Give me a sec here to get that ready. View. Okay, how's that look? Are we good? Oh yeah, I love when it works out. Okay, so let's dive back in. And Jesslyn, are we recording? Okay. Okay, so talking about what's new in 25-26. Well, one of the biggest things that came out back in February was the updated version of the Tiered Fidelity Inventory, or the TFI. And this is a tool that helps us measure how, to the extent to which school teams are applying the core features of school-wide PBIS. And it's exciting, but we've got a lot of people kind of freaking out because it's a new version and there's a new scale to, it used to be a 3-point scale, similar to check in, check out, right? Like it's a 0, 1, 2. Now we've expanded that and we have a 0 through 4 scale. And we have, items that have changed and we have some new things. So Alan's going to drop a link in the chat. We've got training coming up, webinars available specifically for the TFI 3.0. As well as we've added lots of webinars this year. I know Nad just has posted lots of them yesterday specific to Tier 2 because she really has a lot of expertise in check in, check out and Tier 2 systems. So we've got training and support available for you. So feel free to attend those. We've got lots of webinars posted and they are all free. So join us. But one of the things, and I'm kind of leading those TFI webinars coming up, one of the things I noticed in there, taking us back to why I showed you the video on Mr. Lindsay, was that there were some really intentional updates to the language we're using. And, we work very closely with the National Technical Assistance Center, or the Center for PBIS. And so a lot of this comes from them. We're looking for them to kind of guide us on what words are we using in 25, 26 as educators, right? And we know that the way we talk about our kiddos, the way we talk about our our adults in the building really matters. And we noticed that they were really specific about the language choices they made to be more inclusive and always person first, right? We're labeling the behavior, not labeling the kiddo. And so I pulled out 5 that I noticed were really, I thought, ones that we want to kind of take note of. And in the work you're doing with schools to kind of lead this effort, you can think about how you might adopt this language and know that those were really intentionally chosen. And so let's dive into those. There's 5 listed here. So the first one is really interesting because we often will just say, it used to be problem behavior, and you'll still see this in a lot of materials and trainings, right? We think of behavior as kind of like it falls into 2, it's like a T-chart of like good behavior, bad behavior, or it's behavior we want to see, behavior that's unwanted. Like we've kind of moved around how we talk about the behaviors in schools. Um, and so the way that the center is moving and that it's really talked about in the TFI is calling it contextually appropriate behavior, right? And they give an example, like, and this is true for all of us, the things I do when I'm on this Zoom and my behavior showing up here is going to be different than when I'm, out shopping with Nat even, let's say, or when I'm at a karaoke bar on the weekend or doing something different, right? Like all of us, of course, our behavior is contextually appropriate and the language we use and all of that's reflected there. The clothes we wear, the way we present ourselves may look different in these different contexts. And so that's where this kind of comes into play and why this is really important. They intentionally chose that term contextually appropriate behavior rather than just unwanted to emphasize the role of the context we're in and how it's often more from a place of judgment about what behaviors are and are not accepted, right? And as we think about students, cultural backgrounds and what might be acceptable or normalized in their home environment compared to maybe in their school environment, the context does matter. So that's the first one there, contextually appropriate behavior. We are not shying away from talking about equity. And so that has always been at the heart of the work we've done and really, I think, increasingly so over the past decade. And so I quoted directly from the manual for the new TFI about how they define equity. And I'll just read that to you. So in education, equity is when educational policies, practices, interactions, and resources are representative of, constructed by, and responsive to all people such that each person has access to, oops, that should be 1-0, meaningfully participates in and experiences success through high quality learning environments that recognize and honor individual characteristics and group identities. So wanted to pull that out. If this is something that is not something that as a word you can use maybe in your setting or context. Here's the actual definition, and you can find ways to still incorporate those concepts, even if the word has been censored in your environment. All right, marginalized groups. This is another one that we kind of hear, but how do we talk about specific groups of students? And the latest sort of advice in the intentional language from the center is marginalized groups. right? And we know that groups are identified based on their school data, and this changes from year to year. So it's not like a lifetime definition for a person. This can be something that changes. We all of us may be in a marginalized group at some point throughout our lives, and maybe not. And in others, it might be something that's part of their identity for their whole experience. Okay, the next one is partner. And this one we've got, what it used to be were community members or stakeholders. And this is really a specific one. The term stakeholder, while it's widely used and generally understood, we really want to be aware of the potential for offense, especially when we're working with Indigenous communities in contexts where those historical injustices are really relevant, right? So the term stakeholder can be really offensive due to that it has a historical association with colonialism and land grabbing amongst the Indigenous communities in particular. And so you'll see in the TFI and in other things, we're moving away from things like stakeholder to words like partner, right? Thinking that we have partners in this work. So those are the big five. And so I'm curious, maybe we can turn off the recording for a sec, and I just want to open it up to a conversation. Then let's switch it over to why data are a key component of PBIS. So I pulled this directly from the center's website, really as something you can read and kind of think about. But like I said, it's really how we measure the effect we're having. And I'm thinking back to when I was, I used to teach middle school. That's how I started my career. And I remember very specifically in my teacher education program that I had to create a way I was going to create a lesson, when you're doing your first kind of teaching practicum experience and you're teaching a lesson and you have to have like a measurement. You have to have a pre and a post test to say, like, I taught the kids this concept, whatever that is you're learning about. And I think that's really relevant. And it's why we keep doing this within PBIS too, to show that we are having an impact, right? And whether that's, at the macro level, the micro level of individual kiddos, all of it is important. And so you'll see that data is really a key component of PBIS across all three tiers. And across all of our different, the circles, right? We have practices that are the things that teachers do with kiddos, right? And we can have ways that we measure those and use data to inform that. As well as systematically, right? The systems that we have in place data is an important part of that work as well. And so one of the things I think that we provide at PBIS apps is like places to look at to come for your database decision making. And so let's just open it up to a conversation. I have a couple questions here, but I want this to be a place where we can turn off or turn on our mics and talk to one another about some of the questions you have about data. And this is really an opportunity for our team to listen to you all and see what's out there, what struggles you're having, what obstacles are in place for moving this work forward and getting your teams to look at data. So one of the questions that I had that I know Megan and I, we've been kind of planning out our year, we're talking to some folks about was like this idea right now going into a new school year. So I'll bring up my kiddo as an example. Savannah is her name. And so she honestly was struggling at the end of her sixth grade year with a lot of anxiety. And so I know for her, like at her school, we are working on a plan to bring her back and make sure that she has the support she needs in place to start off the school year and go to class more regularly because she was having panic attacks and it was pretty rough for her in May and June. And so for a kiddo like her and for my kids, the first year I've ever had to think about this, like where did we end in sixth grade and how are we going to start seventh grade to really set her up for success. In years past, that hasn't been an issue. Like we just have some context and some life stuff in our family that's going on that's pretty heavy and made it more difficult for her. And so I'm curious out there, when we think about behavior, when kids how do we know that they need support that continued versus for some kiddos, getting a clean slate and a fresh start for that new school year? So What are your thoughts out there? How do you help talk about this in terms of individual kids and support moving from, one school year on to the next? What I like to do sessions, thank you, is share some resources because we have a lot of information that we want to get out there and make sure it's not just living on our websites, but in your hands and in our schools out there. And so this is the latest article from the amazing Megan Cave. And so I'm going to turn it over to her and let her summarize the article. And Alan's going to drop a link in the chat, please, to finding this on our website, or if you might already have it in your inboxes. If you're in our email group, you're probably already getting those, but we'll remind you of that as a resource to share with your teams.
Like Danielle said, we have a theme because she and I, we love a theme. And the theme really is centering on the data aspect of PBIS implementation. We spent all last year, or 2 years ago, I guess, talking about what are the elements of PBIS. And so this year we really wanted to focus on this data element. And so the way that I hoped to kick that off is to talk about the types of data that schools collect and the types of decisions that they make. And it turns out that there was some research conducted around that, and that schools actually collect data on a continuum from simple to complex, and then they make decisions on a continuum from simple to complex. And that simple data don't just require simple decision making, like sometimes it's a mix and match of both. And so the article goes into what that means, and that actually our role in interacting with these data that we collect is to start by asking questions of it. And so in this particular article, I just highlighted some of the big questions that we typically ask of data sets whenever they come across. It used to be our table because they were printed out, but now it's whenever they come across our screens on a computer. We typically start with some of these primary questions to kickstart those conversations as a team. Because the other thing that we are learning is that collecting data, there are questions around that, but then when it comes to making a decision, it's not always clear what you're supposed to do. And so maybe starting with asking these questions and getting curious about those data can help to kind of jumpstart that momentum as a team to making some decisions. But we'll have more throughout the year talking about how do you make decisions with data, how do you interact with them, all the way from school-wide on up to tier 3. So stay tuned for more. This is just the first one.
Thanks, Megan. Great. All right, so let's just pull it back to looking at some of our data resources. And Alan, would you drop in the chat links to the PBIS, the Center on PBIS, which is pbis.org, as well as PBIS apps, which is where you've probably clicked to sign up for today's session. But we have really ramped things up for this upcoming year. We've got lots of new webinars. Like we've kind of been falling into some patterns on our team of offering the same things like the webinars we do. And we did a lot of work this summer to launch some new ones and really to also notice and respond to the need that we're finding folks are having, which is not just training about, let's say, specifically Swiss, which we do, and we do that really well. But we're finding that people also need the foundational stuff of just what is PBIS? What does tiered support mean? So data is part of that, and looking at the TFI and the school climate survey and some of our measures are important, but we're also starting to offer some trainings and webinars that are more about like, how do you implement these practices? I know Nad and I will do some together talking specifically just about like, what is check in, check out? What are best practices around that? Or what are other tier 2 interventions, and how do we make a system for tier 2 that really supports our kiddos and makes it doable for staff? And so look for those to be coming up. And then next month, Megan and I are going to be interviewing Dr. Erin Chaparro, who leads a grant called TIPS. And this is one I am just so proud of the researchers and the folks both on, all the ones here, as well as people like Rob Horner and Erin Chaparro who've done this work with tips for decades. Like this is, we have these different grants, and this has been one that's really had staying power and it's really evolved and just gotten better and better over the years. When I was a coach, gosh, it's been well, how old was my kid? 12. So probably around when I had her, that's when I kind of moved to Eugene and my work changed. So before that though, I was involved with the schools I was coaching. We were on the TIPS grant and I would, work with Anne and they'd come out and do data collection and this kind of thing. And so it's just really cool to see how this thing has really kept going and has this staying power and gets better and better. And so know that coming out in September, we'll be really focused on the TIPS process because it's an evidence-based data decision-making process that works for all sorts of data sets, not just your school's behavior data, but it could incorporate attendance, academic data, all of it. So stay tuned, but on the website, you can find that there are some great resources for TIPS. All right, so I'm going to take us into raise your hand, show of hands if you are at the district or a level where you're supporting multiple schools. Is that the case? I feel like that's a lot of who usually shows up at these, but it certainly varies. Okay, great. So maybe these will be some examples of as you're thinking about the new school year and mapping out your year, right? And being, things we predict, we know that we're going to have, times in October, right? The honeymoon's over. We're going to start, kids' behaviors are going to start escalating, and that's predictable. So let's plan for it. Same here with some of these plans for what their evaluation plan is and their data collection schedule. And so these are real districts that have been doing this. And so we've got their scenarios and what questions they want to answer about PBIS and implementation. And some of these also incorporate academic data. And so this one was a school that's newly implementing district newly implementing school-wide PBIS, and they're on a grant. And so they have some specific things they need to capture. And so for that school, they are looking at their schools group by where they're at in terms of, are they exploring and installing? Are they at initial implementation or full implementation? And they've got their data to show that. And then they're deciding, okay, they're doing their TFI tier 1 at different points in the year. For this one, they're going to do that more frequently for schools that are just getting started. And then that kind of tapers off as schools have been implementing longer. So they might do the TFI walkthrough, the self-assessment survey, the climate survey. Again, they're just mapping out that this is when this is going to happen. And then they're doing a district measurement as well every spring. Right. And so is this something, I'm curious if those of you working, out there, do you have things like this in place where you've got it kind of mapped out for the year on what your data collection might look like or your evaluation for using some of those things, those tools? If not, highly recommend it, right? To have that like in a plan in place now to say, here's when we're going to conduct these things. So here's another example of a district. They've been implementing school-wide PBIS for 3 years. They've got sites at various level of implementation for tier 1, and what many are wanting to scale up to involve tiers 2 and 3. And so they're really focused on using the TFI across those 3 tiers, doing that more frequently for schools that are getting started on that, and then less frequently as schools move to full implementation. So kind of mapping that out. Here's another district. They're really wanting to look at social behavior and academics to create one evaluation plan. And so they've added in some of these school-based academic measurements to do some progress monitoring as well. Getting perception data, again, and different kind of cohorts of schools there. So there you go. Those are some examples. That kind of takes us to the end here. So if you would write in the chat, we'd love to hear what was most helpful to you from today about what we talked about. And then we'll close out with any questions you have. Our team stays on for the next 15 minutes because we know that sometimes people are like, okay, Danielle, that was awesome, but we just want to know about, this one bug we're experiencing when we're looking at Swiss, or how do we, can you help us troubleshoot this, or whatever it is. So thank you all for being here. Please, this is a year-long thing. We do it Friday, every month on a Friday each month. And we'd love you to join us again and bring a friend next time, bring a colleague. So let us know in the chat what was most helpful, and feel free to stay on and get any questions answered. Wishing you a great start to the school year. Thanks for all the work you do out there with kiddos.